In this video, I'll provide some general programming tips and then eventually talk a little bit about some rastering tips. So the first and most important thing is that it is absolutely critical that you break your big tasks into smaller tasks. So for example, given a query, you are supposed to find all the file names that go with that query box. So there's a bunch of different possible sub-goals, which are, what is the depth of the result that we're going to have? So if someone gives me a query box, what is the depth going to be? Depth 3, 4, 5? We already did that a little bit, right? But there's other sub-goals you might try and come up with, like, given a particular file name, what is the bounding box? That is, if I have a file name like d4xxy11, what are the upper left and bottom right coordinates of that box that bounds that image going to be? Now, in File Display Demo, you can actually play around with it, and you can gain a deep understanding of it and then write code that does it. And then the third example is, well, maybe it's useful to figure out how many tiles you need. Like, if someone gives me a query, I can compute that I need 7 tiles wide by 4 tiles tall, or whatever. Now, each of these subgoals isn't necessarily useful, but if you solve one, then even if it turns out the function you wrote that, for example, computes the x and y width isn't actually useful, having written that program or that piece of code is still useful for developing your understanding. Okay? So often when solving a big problem, you solve sub-problems, and then maybe you later figure out that the sub-problems you solved weren't useful. I mean, I don't know. It kind of depends on how you do it. Now, the reason I consider this so important is that we really want you to develop your independence as a programmer, and by far, to me, the most important part of that is being able to manage complexity, to realize that to solve a big problem, it's about solving smaller problems. And this isn't just in terms of your workflow, but it's also in terms of the way you interact with other people. So in this project, like with Project 2, we have a set of rules that the TAs will only spend 10 minutes with you, and they're not going to answer questions that are along the lines of, well, how do I find the right tiles? Because that's not really, I mean, that's your job to figure out. Instead, the kind of questions we think would be better for you to be asking are, I had this specific sub-goal, right? I wanted to compute the number of tiles wide that I'll need, and it's like slightly off. I can't quite figure it out, and here's what I've tried so far. Those are the kind of questions that display independence, and being able to reach those questions, those are much easier to be able to search the web for. And if you're ever in a real world working environment, obviously you're not going to go to your colleague and say, hey, I just have no idea how to do my job. Can you tell me how to do my job? But if instead you have a very pointed query, the kind that real world programmers have, people can help you out. Okay? So this project, I really want you to start having this strong sense of independence, because you're really going to need it as you move on, either as a computer science major or just as somebody trying to use the tools of this course to build your own projects. Okay? Another big tip. You should, when trying to do something totally new in a crazy new domain, do what I call hello worlding. So just like on the first lecture of this class, we wrote a program that just printed out hello world, and that was to demonstrate how to use all the basic compilation and interpreter tools to print out the words hello world, because there's a whole giant tool chain and things we had to think about and basic Java syntax to get that hello world. So in this project, you have another big leap of faith that you're going to have to take, which is how to display images in the browser. And so just to get some momentum going, I think it's a really good idea to, for example, consider just hard coding the getMap raster function to just return any arbitrary answer, and then move on to trying to display the correct images instead of just the ones you made up. And that'll be true for the routing part. If you do the autocomplete gold points, there's just plenty of places where you can output a dummy output just to make sure you have a clear understanding of how the output you provide is going to be used. And so I'll give some more thoughts on this in a little bit when we talk about rastering in particular. Okay, second, when you're trying to test your code, you should not try to use map.html at first. That is, you shouldn't use the interactive-based HTML file, but instead you should use the hard-coded images, HTML files that I mentioned, test1, 2, 3, 4, test12 images, and so forth. And we also will be providing, have not quite yet, but we will be providing some JUnit test files. There'll be some sample client-side tests that you're welcome to build upon. Now these won't be complete, the autograder will be a little bigger than those, but you'll have those at least to give you a basic sense that things are working. And lastly, in terms of my general tips, make sure to take things a little at a time. So it is not a good idea to sit down, come up with an algorithm, and then write all of getMap raster, and then cross your fingers and hope that it works. Instead, you should be building, again, these little sub-goals. You should be building solutions to those, and then testing those solutions. And that doesn't necessarily mean writing JUnit tests. It could just be trying out a couple of inputs and seeing what it prints out. And I think JUnit tests are sometimes better, sometimes not. But the most important thing is that if you break your program into sub-goals, make sure those sub-pieces work. If you do build a ton of stuff and then try and see if it works, there's just so much to think about to figure out what's broken, and you end up having bajillions of print statements, or you have to use the debugger, and it's complicated. So instead, try and test your sub-pieces first. Now, if you do find that you fell into temptation and now you're watching this video with your head in your hands just thinking, oh, what have I done to myself? Well, try commenting out a bunch of stuff and then slowly unveil your code like a beautiful, I don't know, what do you unveil? Peacocks? Let's imagine that we unveil peacocks. We're like, hey, look, I'm gonna abandon that analogy. But you can slowly unveil all the pieces of your program and show that they work. Thanks me from a year ago. I'm jealous of the fact that you did not have a cold. But anyway, all right. It's a weird thing to do. Be jealous of yourself. I guess I'm always jealous of my younger self, because who wants to get older? Anyway, so Project 2C. That's it for our video lecture series. The only other thing that might be useful to you, other than the spec, is on April 12th when we do our Software Engineering 1 lecture. You might have some tips there that you find useful as well. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the project and have fun. See you around.